Welcome back, man. It is a privilege to get to do the show because I get to reach out to different people, people that I've always had questions for. A lot of this I do obviously for you guys, but for me also, there's so many questions I've had for so many people that I get to meet. My guest today is I probably will never have somebody more motivational than this guy. He's an author, motivational speaker. He's an entrepreneur. He's a first Phorm athlete. He's a competitive bodybuilder. He's a model, and he's one of 4 people in the world that's alive that had hand-heart syndrome, where he's born. We'll go into this in a little bit. But he is an incredible motivational speaker, and I've been researching this guy all week, and I was so excited to have him on the show. Welcome, Mr. Nick Santonastasso. Did I get it right?
Yeah,
I got it right, man.
Thank you, brother.
There you go. Hey, Nick, how you doing, man?
I'm great, man. Happy to be here.
So here's the thing. I did a lot of research. I was probably 8 hours of just listening to your podcast and all this kind of stuff. I was very excited for this, and then I realized after probably the Ed Milet interview, I was like, you are one of the most loquacious guys, man. You are a really, really great speaker. I'm probably not going to have to do a whole lot because your story, it just tells itself, and it is so fantastic. You're originally from New Jersey.
Yeah.
And one of the things, can you talk a little bit about initially your parents found out you have hand-heart syndrome and the fact that there's only been 12 people at the time that had ever been born with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 25 years old. In 1996, my mom went in for a late ultrasound.
Yeah.
And they sat them down, they pulled the baby up, and they started freaking out. The doctor's like, oh my God. They're like, what's wrong? And they said, well, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like your baby's limbs are being developed. It looks like he's missing his legs, his arm, his face might be messed up. Clearly, my face wasn't messed up.
Yeah.
And what they did was they classified me with hand-heart syndrome. And hand-heart syndrome either leaves the babies with undeveloped limbs or undeveloped organs. And so like you said, at the time of my birth in 1996, I was the 12th baby in medical history that they've ever seen this happen to. And out of the 12, 8 of them passed away due to undeveloped organs. And so they told my parents, they said, Mr. and Mrs. Santonastasso, your baby boy has about a 30% chance to live. And my parents, as a parent, like, what do you do? I don't know. I'm not a parent yet. But what my parents did was make a massive promise and a massive decision, and that was the focus on the 30% versus the 70% chance of me dying. And the reason being, now that I look at it, is like what you focus on, you get more of. And like focus is one of the most important things, which we can dive into, but they focus on the fact that I was going to live versus not going to live.
Yeah.
And what you focus on, you feel. So especially for my mom, if she focused on the fact that I was going to die, she would have more stress. Her hormones would have been freaking out a little bit more, and she probably wouldn't have been a great environment to host a child like myself.
Yeah.
And so fast forward a few months later, I was a C-section baby. They pulled me out. They ran and did tests on my organs, and they came back 100% healthy. And the only thing that was affected were my limbs. So now I'm in a unicorn body with no legs and one arm.
There you go. Now, here's the thing. Your parents, listen to all these interviews. They are incredible. That not only, the attitude that they chose, but the attitude they instilled on you. You said they treated you like everyone else.
Yeah.
They put situations in front of you and asked you, hey, how are you going to solve this? The world's not going to change for you.
Yeah.
That was incredibly motivating for me. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. And I think it's funny because they may have not known what they were doing, but they were doing some good stuff.
Right.
And I'm the last of the family, so I'm the baby. I have 3 other siblings, and so they got the split test 3 times as a parent.
The A/B testing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, first example too is like when I was brought home. I was brought home and I was all bundled up, and they didn't tell my siblings that I was any different. So they didn't do any pre-frames or say, hey, like, be gentle or anything. They just like brought me into the house and unraveled me, and there I was, a baby with no legs, one arm. And what's interesting is that my siblings were like, wow, look at his hair and look at this, and he's so beautiful and blah, 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 blah. But they didn't notice anything because my parents didn't put emphasis on it. And so for them, it was just normal. And so that was one thing that was pretty cool. And then the other stuff, for example, is they would put my clothes in front of me and say, all right, Nick, like, figure it out. I mean, as a baby, they dressed me, but at a certain point, they sat me down and they put the things in front of me. And what's pretty interesting is, plug or not, my mom has a book called How We Raise an Adaptive Child in a Handicapped World.
Yeah.
And I thought that was brilliant because you can have a full-bodied but be handicapped by your upbringing.
That is your attitude, is that other people are handicapped by their attitude. You're totally
Their conditioning.
Normal. Their conditioning.
Yeah.
Their conditioning.
I'm not normal, but yeah. I'm a superhuman because of my brain. And so, for example, by them putting the things in front of me and saying, hey, figure it out, I finally figured out. Clearly, I got clothes on this interview.
Yeah.
But what they really did, I don't know if they knew consciously what they were doing, but I developed a great relationship with failure very early on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, if you look back in your childhood, especially those that are listening, it's like, don't do that, you're gonna fall, or don't do that, you're gonna get hurt. And they were like, no, fall faster, fail faster, experience the grit, the resilience, like. the world out there ain't gonna help you put your clothes on. The world out there ain't gonna put stepping stools in little holes so you can open things and open drawers. Like, it's not gonna happen.
No one is coming to save you.
Exactly.
No one is coming to save you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they did that. Another challenge was they put my food in front of me and was like, figure it out. And I figured that out. And so the few things, right? I developed a great relationship with failure. I became solution oriented, which is a massive skill that you acquire. By the way, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to make more money, solve a bigger problem. We get paid to think and we get paid to solve problems. And so I became solution oriented. I focused on the problem. I focused on the solution versus the problem. And then the other thing was I got rejected with everything.
Yeah.
I got rejected by the couch. I got rejected by my clothes. I got rejected by the food. And so rejection wasn't bad. It was part of the process for me. So my frame going into anything was like, nothing's going to be easy. And shit's going to be hard, but I'm going to persist and I'm going to learn. And I'm eventually going to figure it out because I'm stubborn.
So your relationship with failure taught you so much. You don't even see it as a bad thing. You see the failure as like this way to grow. And by the way, you said something also, and I love this quote so much. Elon Musk says we get paid in direct linear proportion to the size of the problem we solve.
Yeah.
And so you're solution oriented, which is brilliant. But again, going back to the whole thing, failure, you have a relationship with failure where it is not a bad thing for you.
Yeah, and that was learned early on because it was part of the process and it wasn't viewed as a negative. So oftentimes if people are trying to coddle, if you're coddled or like don't do that, like they're trying to let you avoid failure because they don't want you to experience it. And because maybe for them, they have a bad relationship with failure. So consciously they don't know what they're doing, but unconsciously it's fucked up. It's not good, right? And so I got to experience failure. I got to experience falling on my face. And even now as an entrepreneur, you realize the only difference between someone that you idolize is they failed a hell of a lot more than you did, and they did it for a longer period of time. And so now, we were just talking about this in the car, is like imperfect action. Just take action. Just take action. Just fall. Just fail. Just learn to learn. And that's the other golden rule of failure too, is like in the midst of failure, to make it a win is you ask a specific question. And the specific question is, what did I learn? What did I gain? Who did I become because of this thing? And I've conditioned my brain over and over again in the midst of shit or in the midst of problems and challenges to spark the question of, what am I gaining here?
Have you ever heard speed of implementation and suspension of disbelief? Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Those two things? That's why for my clients, I talk to them about that all the time. It's like, somebody's doing this right. Somebody. Now, in your situation, you had got to learn on your own. There's a lot of things where I don't know where to go with this, right? For me, with this podcast, well, I have some other people who've done podcasts. I can look and see what they've done. But for me, it was like one of these situations where you just have to do it. Like you said, take action and fail, and that is genius, right? And none of us have an excuse, right? So now going back to the other situation, your friends also didn't treat you differently. Yeah. So coming up all the way, through elementary school, junior high, high school, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I think preschool, like elementary school, I didn't realize I was different.
Right.
And usually it's other people that let you know you're different. And so I was just a young kid living life. And then I got into middle school, and I always say, middle school and high school are the most judgmental times. But also middle school and high school, it's boyfriends and girlfriends and different things like that. And so when I got into middle school, I would say that I felt, or at least I acknowledged or I was aware that I was different. I was like, everyone's growing. I'm not growing. I'm in a wheelchair. I have an aide with me in school. They let me leave the class early. Like, why do I get these privileges? And then I look around and I realize I'm extremely different. And during that time as well, that was when I wanted girls to like me. Yeah. And what's pretty interesting is, as humans, we have an experience, and then based off of that experience, we develop a belief. And so for me, I was on the bus and I was about 13 years old, and there was a girl to the left of me, and she was making fun of everyone. And she looked at me and looked me in my eyes and was like, I don't even have to start with you. You're already too messed up anyway. Look at you. And a few things go on. So one thing that goes on in the brain is you start to stack. So we can stack thoughts in a negative way, and we can stack thoughts in a positive way. So for example, if you ever woken up on the wrong side of the bed, if you don't catch your focus, your whole fucking day's negative. Tire pressure's off. I got to go to work. Betty at the work, all of it, just stack and stack and stack. And so I started to stack thoughts when that girl said that to me. And the thoughts were, well, maybe she's right. Right. Maybe I am disgusting. And maybe I am fucked up. And maybe girls don't like me, and I'll never have a girlfriend. I'll never get a job. And I started going and going and going and going. And I also developed a belief that I couldn't get girls and girls don't like me. And that's how I developed those beliefs. And during that time as a 13-year-old kid, I can't have compassion for her because I'm not that mature emotionally. Right. I can't have compassion for her. And because of that, now that I look back, but because of that drove me as a kid to probably join wrestling, because I guess one of the driving forces for me is like, I want girls. I want girls to like me. I want to fall in love with my body. I don't want to be disgusting.
Yeah.
And so that's how the whole wrestling thing got into play, which we can get into. But now that I look at it as an adult, I wish I could go back and I can hug her.
Yeah.
And love on that little girl.
You see, you have compassion now.
Because
you understand what she was going through.
What is that little girl going through at home and with her own shit that she had to take it out on me, a man with no legs and arms? She must have been going through some shit, and she just had to take it out on me. And so now, as an adult and with perspective, I have compassion and empathy for her, but back then I didn't have that.
You know what's crazy is like a lot of people watching went through. I got picked on a ton in high school. Yeah. My experience was not like yours. I mean, but I got picked on a ton, and I started playing football for the same reason. I started playing left tackle and outside linebacker because I want to get the girls, right? And so it was the same type of situation. But I can't imagine like the amount of stress and pressure that was on there. You know what I'm saying? From your standpoint, and again, it's one of these situations where like if you did it, we have no excuse. I'm gonna keep coming back to that. Nobody's here to save you, and if you did it, we have no fucking excuse for why we can't do it. I have a question from a good buddy of mine, Mr. Ryan Stewman, hardcore closer. He wants to know. He asked why you chose to saw part of your arm off.
Yeah, I'm crazy. And so my older brother, he had passed away. My older brother was a wrestler, and I'm from New Jersey, and wrestling's like a religion, and everyone's badass wrestlers. And so, and by the way, when I got into high school, all my best friends are wrestlers, and so I had good scary friends, and so I didn't really get picked on.
Yeah.
And so one day they were like, Nick, you should become a wrestler. And I was like, I can't, my arm. And for those that are watching too, is like this arm was my right arm was about 5 inches longer than it is now. My bone was going faster than my skin. So my whole life, it was super sensitive. If I would have hit my arm hard enough, my bone came through my skin. So I was always protective of it. But what's interesting is what that girl did was she allowed me to experience enough pain for me to change.
Yeah.
And, coming from the cloth that I'm cut, the human psychology, people change for two reasons, pain or pleasure, but will always run away from pain faster than will run towards pleasure. And so I experienced enough pain for me to shift. And a lot of times for those that are listening is us humans, we have to experience so much pain until you change.
Yeah.
Like you get diagnosed with diabetes and then you start working out, or you get rejected and then you start going to the gym. You experience enough pain where you hit a threshold where you say, that's it. And so I said, that's it. I need to do something that's going to dig me out of this hole. And so I said, all my boys are wrestling. I want to be a wrestler. My older brother was a wrestler. And so my solution-oriented Nick mind kicked in. Yeah. And I was like, how can I do this? How can I get around this arm thing? And so I came home and I sat my parents down. I said, Mom and Dad, I want to become a wrestler. And Mom was like, oh, no, God forbid, wrestling's the most physical sport. And I was like, they're like, what are you going to do? I was like, well, is there any way we can cut my arm off? And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, can we cut my arm off? Can we do something about it? And they had asked me, they said, is this something that you really want to do? And I said, absolutely. And they accepted the solution. Now, I want to give context why my parents accepted the solution so quickly, because they may sound crazy. But when I was born, doctors really never seen anything like this. Yeah. And so they wanted to do a bunch of things. Like they were like, he's got 2 bones in his finger. Let's chop it and make 2 fingers. And they were like, no. And then they're like, well, let's just cut his finger off. It's useless. And they were like, no. And then they were like, well, let's put metal rods in his legs and spin them every day so his bones lengthen and maybe one day he can have prosthetic legs. And they were like, no. And the reason why they said no is because it's like, that's Nick's choice and he doesn't have a voice yet.
Right.
So thank God my parents. And so when I was 15 or 16 and I presented the solution of like, hey, I'm in discomfort. Here's a solution, let's amputate my arm. They were like, okay, he brought the solution, let's ride, let's do it.
Right.
And so 16 years old, we went in for the surgery. I looked at the doctor. I was like, Doc, I need to be able to beat someone over the head with this arm when I come out. Like, I got to be able to do some good things. And I went along with the surgery. I came out, it went beautifully. And I always say, I go back to school, the happiest kid that just cut his arm off.
Yeah, I was excited. Got to cut my arm off, man. You mentioned something before about pain causing people to change.
Yeah.
You read the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet.
So you mentioned before about present moment awareness and gratitude. The book's a lot about that. My father was killed by a drunk driver, and then I got sent to the Middle East. I was an officer in the military. A couple weeks later, while I was there, my girlfriend left me. And I remember at this point feeling like a victim. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yep.
I try to be strong, but I wasn't strong at this point. And then my friend recommended that book to me. And I read it, and it made so much. First 3 chapters, I started crying. I couldn't believe how much this book meant to me. I've given the book to other people, and I realized they haven't suffered enough. For some people, that level of pain, because man, it's man, you got your $55,000 a year job, you're good. Like that's not a lot of pain. You still live in your mom's basement, but the mom's basement is comfy. She still makes your bed. You know what I'm saying? It's not quite enough pain, and so you don't really want to make that change. And like my man Ryan Stewman said, he said that it's the force of average that keeps bringing you back towards the middle, right? Because you haven't experienced enough pain, right? Sometimes the worst thing to be in like a professional sports league is that middling team who keeps getting a middling draft pick and you can't ever really get better. It's that type of situation. A lot of times you said a lot of stuff about gratitude. You said a lot of stuff in some of your motivational speeches. And it spoke to me because I've been to rock bottom. I'm not there now, but man, I do remember what it felt like. And then when I talk to some people and they don't get it, that's usually what I feel like is going on, right? There's been enough coddling and enough support around them to where they've never really understood what that was like or been fully exposed, or maybe they grew up exceptionally attractive or exceptionally good athletes or something like that, and they haven't experienced it enough, and they're just not ready to hear it. So that is really interesting.
I like that because in reality, all pain is enough leverage,
right?
And so you need leverage, but I would challenge people too is like, you don't need to wait till enough pain to change. They may not see that they need to change, and I'm not saying they're broken, they need to be fixed, but I'm saying is like, why wait until we experience enough pain to change? Why can't we just shift from a state of gratitude and appreciation and just wanting to get to a higher level? Yeah,
gratitude brings you in the present moment. I used to have a saying that it's impossible to have a basketball in your hand and be unhappy. I think it's impossible to have gratitude and be unhappy. You said that before, and I agree with that completely.
Yeah. This is an interesting concept too, because especially in this industry, mindset has been jaded. So if you go into a room, and I've trained over 1 million people live, and I can say, what do you think when I say mindset? And they're like, motivation. I'm like, fucking bullshit, and it's not your fault, it's been thrown around so many times by teachers and gurus. What mindset is actually training the body and mind with enough consistency, repetition, and intensity to actually change the biochemistry of your body. Like that's true mindset, like evolving the brain.
Right.
And so going into gratitude, and I was just on a live, and I said, the quality of your life comes down to the quality of the emotions you feel on a day-to-day basis. And you and I both know that we have millionaire and billionaire friends that have everything, but their emotional home or where they go to is pissed off and angry.
Yeah.
You can have millions of dollars, but if you're fucking pissed off and angry, you're pissed off and angry.
Yeah.
And then we can go to a third world country and see a kid kicking a can, and he's happier than pigs and shit. That's all he knows.
Yeah.
But he's happy. So who's really winning?
Yeah.
The kid is, right? Because he's happy. And so what mindset is like, I want to help people condition their body and their mind so they can feel these specific emotions that they want to feel. So gratitude being one of the most important ones. Gratitude, as we were talking about, is when you experience gratitude, you cannot feel any other emotion simultaneously, any negative emotion, whether that's fear, anxiety, anger, whatever it may be. It's emotionally impossible to feel those two at the same time. But now I can go into a room and I can take people through a gratitude exercise, and I always do this, and I'll be like, how many of you had an amazing experience? Boom. How many of you cried? Boom. How many of you smiled? How many of you didn't feel anything? And there'll always be one or two people that don't feel anything.
Right.
And I will tell them, I say, it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing. It's a sign that you don't experience or exercise the muscle of gratitude enough, and that's okay. And that's my sign to you that like you need to go to those moments more. And all of us, like the training never stops, there's always the next level. And so if we can experience gratitude on a day-to-day basis more, your quality of life goes up. And that was one of the things, especially coming into this new year, is like, maybe I've been jaded by business, or maybe I've just been fucking grinding the whole time, but I told myself, I said, I want to feel more.
Yeah.
I want to be able to cry on command because I can go to an event and feel it.
Right.
I want to be able to tap into my creator, whether it's God, the universe, whatever you believe in. Like I want to have that relationship as well. And so it all came down to emotions and state. And so you can ask yourself right now when you're listening is like, what is an emotion that you feel regularly? And so you can ask yourself, how frequently do I experience anger? Is it once a year? Is it once a month? Is it once a day? Is it twice a day? And what you'll notice is you'll notice your emotional home, which is probably anger, stress, or anxiety. And that's somewhere where you go to all the time. And that's so important is because, especially with entrepreneurs, is we can come into our business and we could be like at a level 10 fucking super excited, and then you go home and you bring your girl a level 2.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I definitely see what you're saying.
Or at the beginning of the relationship, you're both bringing a level 10 and things are amazing. You do anything for that girl, and then COVID gets in the way, and then business gets in the way, and then you start pivoting, and then you don't even realize on an unconscious level that you guys are meeting in the middle and both bringing a level 2 fucking energy.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense.
And so I would also challenge the audience and ask yourself, if I'm playing at a level 10 in business, am I still bringing that level 10 home? And we all know you wouldn't date a 2. So you better fucking bring up your emotional state.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's a balance. Have you read anything on positive psychology? So like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi or Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. Have you ever read that?
No, I'll share what I've read.
Yeah.
I've read some of, and I'm like Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
And when people are like, how do you have so much knowledge at 25? I'm a knowledge broker.
Yeah.
Meaning like I'll go to the experts and learn the keys so I can give you the keys, right? And so I've been grateful enough to be on a world tour with Tony. So I spent a lot of time with Tony, John Azaroff, who's an OG in the psychology, and Joe Dispenza are kind of like my go-to.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Actually, I have a couple questions. Number one, you've mentioned before about how to educate yourself. Do you, this is something I want to get like real literal here. Are you into audiobooks? Are you reading? Like what do you do? How are you consuming information? Do you ever try triple speed Spotify? This is a new thing I've been doing, triple speed on Spotify while I'm in the gym. Do you try stuff like this?
Yeah, so I do try stuff like that, and I'll tell you what works for me. And by the way, like everybody has a different taste of learning. That's why the school system sucks.
Right.
Everybody's got a different taste of learning. And so for me, I will read or I will watch videos and I will take notes. But what helps me ingrain it more is I'll teach it right after.
Teach it. Okay, yes.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And so for example, like every single Monday inside my inner circle, I teach. Right. And especially during COVID, by the way, I had a limiting belief that I wasn't tactical enough. So what did I do? I fucking created over 200 trainings and was like, I'm tactical now.
Yeah.
I can pull out any tool at any time. And so what I'll do is I'll watch something or I'll read a book and I will basically like transcribe it. And then I'll say like, how did this apply in my life? What are my stories? And then I'll go and I'll immediately teach it. So it ingrains it more into me.
Yeah.
But also coming into learning, which is pretty interesting, is with the brain, studies show that when we listen passively, we only retain 7 to 10% of the information. That's why we learn shit in school, because you just sat there passively.
Yeah.
Now, when you physically write with notes, you actually take that from 7 to 10 to 40 to 50%. You're going to retain it by taking notes, because it drives it deeper into who you are. And then if you want to take it to master level and by the way, this is why Tony does what he does, is when you're calling out, when you're saying yes, when you're moving your body, when you're sitting up in a good state and you're learning, you take it from 40 to 50 to 80 to 90% retention. Yeah. So when I go into an event and I see no energy and I see no one taking notes and no one calling on the crowd, I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? You're wasting your time. And so if I'm a speaker in an event, I'll go in and I'll set the tone. I'm like, hey, who wants to retain some information here? This is how you're going to do it, and keep that same vibe throughout the whole event.
That's amazing. Well, there's a great book called Spark that talks about that also, where it's like when I'm doing physical activity, I'm more likely to be able to remember what it is.
Yeah.
It's an exercise we do in the military where we're actually going through training. But the thing you said before, that's really awesome. So I was a mission navigator and I got upgraded to instructor navigator. And when I was upgraded to instructor and I was teaching to the other mission navigators before, that is when I finally understood the aircraft. That was like you said before, is when you take notes and then you teach it to the other person. I think I completely agree with that, man. There's another great book by Peter F. Drucker from the Drucker School of Economics, and it's called Managing Oneself. And like you said before, some people, they write stuff down, this tacit writing it down. I remember now. Some people it's audio, some people it's video. There's different ways. And I think one of the biggest gifts somebody can give themselves is figure out what is your superpower learning style. For me, I know most people can't do triple speed audiobooks. I can't do anything slower than that at this point. Like that's all I can't. I can
feel you. You're a high speed guy.
Yeah. When I listen to my guests at regular speed, I'm like, God, he's talking so slow. It's so crazy. Right. Here's another thing, man. Dan Fleyshman.
Yeah.
Going back to gratitude.
The GOAT.
The GOAT, right? He goes, how do you always have a smile on your face when I see you? That's what Dan Fleyshman wants to know.
Yeah. And I get that asked a lot. And the reason being is because I can condition myself to be this way. Yeah. And so what I mean by that is most people have shitty days. I have shitty minutes. And so I snap out of things faster than most because of what I'm asking myself and the things that I'm going through. Now, real quick, I want to go into the 3 parts of the brain because it's just going to help people. You have 3 brains. You have your thinking, you have your doing, and you have your being. Yeah. Most people are on like the thinking, the kind of like the thinking or the doing level, but being is where like you embody it. And so a great analogy is you remember the first time you learned how to drive? Yeah. Right? You get in the car and you're like, oh shit. And like you're checking your mirror and you're putting your seatbelt on and you're like, how do I put this thing in park or drive, right? And then after a couple reps, you get in the car, you put your seatbelt on, you're on your way, you're snapping the steering wheel, you're having a grand old time. Then a few years later, what can all of you do while you drive? You see women doing their makeup and doing some crazy things. That's because you've done it with enough repetition to where it becomes. And so now you don't need to think about it. I know there's times, and people listening, where you drive to A to B and you're like, how the fuck did I get there?
Or you drive to the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like, I drove home. I was supposed to go to this girl's house. What the fuck am I doing?
Yeah, right? And that's because you've done it with enough repetition. So the truth is that we can give you all the tools and we can give you all the strategies, but the real challenge is, are you going to do it enough until you embody it?
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
And so with the whole smiling thing is, I've conditioned myself to live in a beautiful state, and I strive to. I'm not a master, and I'll never have mastery, but there's beautiful states and there's suffering states. Suffering states are negative emotions, anxiety, stress, anger, fear, all the things that you don't want to feel, which are probably some of your emotional homes. And then the beautiful state is the joy, the gratitude, the happiness. And so if you can, with enough repetition, if you can condition yourself to feel grateful all the time, the external world will never trigger you. And by the way, like, if you get triggered, that's your shit you need to clean up, and that's not the world.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they go through life and they make sure that their environment is a safe environment so they don't get triggered. That's such bullshit, and it's not. You're never going to have a life like that. And so how can you condition yourself so nothing affects you?
Yeah.
And that's mastering the internal world so the external world follows.
Yeah, man. Being anti-fragile, that's incredible. So, okay, now I have another question, because I was captain of the wrestling team. I want to know, so my favorite was a bow and arrow. That was my favorite.
Okay.
I'd dig my head right in their rib cage, and I'd spin around, and I'd tap them out like, all right, pin them like that. What you did have 2 wins. You mentioned that. Be technical with me.
Yeah.
How did you win these matches, bro? I want to know.
Yeah. So first off, I'll say that I was more of a defensive wrestler, and I realized my value was that if I don't get pinned and give up a full 6 points, that's value. Yeah. And so one of my defensive moves was called the potato, and looks like a potato. Yeah. And so, like, I would be on my back and I'd be about to get pinned, and my whole team's like, potato, and I would dig this into whatever part I could get it into your body. Now, weirdly enough, some guys wouldn't move. I'm like, you're fucking weird. And other guys, they'd be like, wow, and they'd jump off me. Even like districts, regional people, they would jump off me, and I would dig it into them, and I'd escape, and it worked. But now for the 2 wins, my one win was probably someone who just wasn't really good, and I got a takedown, and I wasn't good at keeping control. They would always usually get up. Yeah. But for this specific win, it was like the last period, and I wasn't used to looking up and saying, "Oh, I'm ahead." Yeah. You know, so I looked up and they're like, "You're ahead." Like, hold on. And I remember, like, because you can get hit with stalling. Yeah. And I was literally holding on to this kid's ankle with his shoelaces. You tied your shoelaces. Yeah. I had his shoe in my cheek, and I'm holding on, and he's dragging me around, and the clock hit, and he didn't get the escape, and I won. Oh, wow. I remember my whole face was bloody from his shoelaces, but I fucking won. And it was so dope. Yeah, I was so happy. And he had cool shoes, and usually guys with cool shoes, they're good. Well, not today. And then my other win was, and to be specific, was it was either guys would get on their level, so they wouldn't stand, they would get down on their knee and they would head play, and we'd grapple there. And I think I brought him down into a cement mixer, where you come under an underhook here and then put him that way. Yeah. But it turned into, I snapped him down, and then with this arm, I came over his head, and with this arm, I cradled him. Wow. I actually beat him in a cradle. Wow. And what's so funny is I couldn't believe that I actually did it, and I was actually pissed off because I thought he gave me the win. And my coach was like, congratulations. I'm like, fuck you. He's like, what do you mean, Nikki? Like, you won. And I'm like, no, he gave it to me, you know? And it was hard to give myself credit, but I cradled him.
But you had a real strong neck, man. I bet you had a real
I was good at staying off my back.
Yeah.
My boys were always like, if you don't know how many lights are on the gymnasium ceiling, ask Nick. Yeah. Because I was always on my back.
That's crazy, man.
Fuck you guys. I love you.
That's awesome. All right. So we're wrestling. And is this the period where the skateboarding starts, the Vine starts, the prank videos? How does that come about?
Skateboarding started way early on. Do you remember? I didn't do it, of course. I didn't have legs, but soap shoes.
I don't.
Does anyone remember soap? Yeah, so soap shoes, right? So what you would do is, like, you'd get shoes and you'd rub soap on them, and you'd grind railings and stuff. My brother did that, and he had like long hair at the time. But one day he had just put me on a skateboard, and they put me on my stomach, and they like rolled me around, and it was a great form of transportation for me. So that's how I started skating. But going into Vine, wrestling started my confidence. I started to gain more confidence. I adopted the identity of an athlete and a wrestler, so I thought it was badass. Mm-hmm. And then Vine came out, and I knew what it felt like to be suicidal, depressed, unconfident. I knew I wasn't the only one feeling these things. And so I said, I want to create a way where people can be inspired but maybe shifted. And I was like, well, there's no one that's legless crawling around Walmart pretending to be a zombie. I'm going to do that. And so my local Walmart in New Jersey, which Nick's not allowed in anymore, I went into that Walmart and I put fake blood on my face. I put fake blood on my clothes, and I set out to my local Walmart. And there was a guy, we were looking for a victim, and there was a guy heavily invested in the paper towels. And I looked at my camera guy. I was like, record this. He's like, you're going to try it? I'm going to try it. And I came around the corner. I was like, ah! And he's like, oh, and he threw the paper towels at my face. And I apologized. I'm like, dude, I didn't think this would work. It's just a prank. I looked at my camera guy. I was like, was that 6 seconds? He goes, yes. I'm like, this is just what the internet needs. And they picked me up. They picked me up and carried me out of the Walmart before I got kicked out. And my goal was, I wanted 500 people to see this. I was like, I didn't have a big following, and I wasn't anyone. And I was like, I want 500 people to see this. I posted the video, and I woke up for school the next morning, and it was the #1 video on Vine. It had 80,000 likes and over 80,000 shares. I go into school. People are like, dude, you see your video? You're the zombie king. I'm like, what the fuck did I get myself into? And so I started doing pranks, and I gained 1 million followers in under a year in my senior year. And that led me to The Walking Dead hiring me to scare Norman Reedus in Tokyo, Japan as my first like real paid prank.
That's incredible, man.
And if you're trying to understand the lesson for that story is, one, don't try to model me because it's not going to fucking work. And the second thing is that we all have a unique way to get eyes on us or our product or service. You just have to be resourceful enough to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you got to push your ego to the side to find it too.
Yeah.
You know? So you're doing that. And then also, so they're doing the pranks, and then there's a transition that happens there. And you actually do this transition on video. Like you tell your fans, hey, I want to do something else. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I got to the point where we're talking about fulfillment, right? And this is really powerful for entrepreneurs, because you can have an entrepreneur that's on the path of success and achievement, which I want you to have success and achievement, but the goalpost is always going to move. But it's the entrepreneur that masters fulfillment that's just always going to be happy. And so I realized doing pranks that I wasn't fulfilled. I was like, this is it. There's got to be something more. I don't feel what I want to feel. And so I made a decision, and this was after I moved out to LA. I dropped out of college. I was supposed to go to college, and I got an opportunity to be like a core cast member of a show, like Impractical Jokers, but for disabled people. And so I persuaded my parents to move out to LA with a roommate, and moved out to LA. And 2 weeks after I signed my lease, they were like, the show never got picked up. Good luck. And I was like, fuck, that happens in business? I didn't know, like, I thought this was set in stone. And so I went broke in LA. While I was in LA, my brother had let me know that he was addicted to heroin and that I needed to come home. And so I came home from LA. And from there, I moved in. I did what every kid wants to do and moved into their parents' basement. Said no one ever. And I moved into my parents' basement. I was like, all right, what's bigger? What's better? What's next? And I was analyzing, and I said, well, I never been in like really good shape, because, by the way, as a wrestler, in order to be eligible for varsity, I needed to weigh 85 pounds and to wrestle 106, and I didn't. So everybody's cutting weight and I'm stuffing my face. So I was a little chubby wrestler. And so I was like, I was never been in good shape. I was like, if I could become a bodybuilder, I can monetize it, but there's no excuse, and like it'll just change my life. And so I told my parents the vision, and with bodybuilding, like you can't transform your body in like a few months, like, and so it was really hard for them to see the vision, but they let me do it. And so I became a bodybuilder, and I started lifting, which, by the way, I just found someone who was jacked, and I was like, let me learn from you so you can condense decades into years. And I started lifting, and that's when I became a bodybuilder, and I started posting content. But like you said, I made an announcement to everyone. I said, I don't like pranking. You know, like the pranking doesn't fulfill me. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to become a bodybuilder, and this is what I'm going to do. And I got backlash, and I got hate, and you know, I always say, people are like, how you become a bodybuilder? You have no legs. And I'm like, most bodybuilders skip leg day anyway.
That's
you know,
right,
I'll fit right in. And so I set out on this bodybuilding journey, and I started posting content. And to be honest, you know, I wasn't getting much traction, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I actually, early on, I paid one of these Instagram accounts. I didn't have $400, but I paid them $400 a post just to get some traction. And I did that for a very long time. Every single month, I would allocate $400 to Instagram promotion, and that started me on the roll. And then I got hit up by who is a mentor of mine, but he wasn't a mentor at the time. He hit me up. He was like, hey, I have a facility in Tampa. Would you love to come see it? I'm like, absolutely. And I'm from Jersey. So I flew out to Tampa. I fell in love with Tampa. I'm like, the weather's great. The bodybuilding industry is here. And so I moved to Tampa. And that's when I pursued a 12-week preparation to be on a men's physique stage. And so I did a 12-week preparation, and people loved to follow my journey. I gained a lot of followers on that. And that's when I met The Rock, and The Rock posted me. And I took third in that competition against full-bodied guys.
All right, so a couple things. The first question I have is, something you talked about before is the way to symmetrically for you to get symmetrical muscle contraction. Can you talk about that? You actually came up with techniques. In order for your entire body, in order how to do that.
Yeah. So for the first like maybe year and a half, I was only lifting the left side of my body.
Right.
And I noticed that and so when I got into bodybuilding, they're like, everything's about symmetry. I'm like, I'm fucked. Yeah. You know, like my left side is jacked, my right side is very weak. And so I went into the gym and I with my trainers and stuff, I was built off resistant bands.
Yeah.
I use resistant bands and I got very strict on my form, on my posture, and micro movements to make sure I'm just contracting the right thing. So for example, I don't have, on the left side, I have a lot more length that I can go to contract my chest. But if I just throw my shoulders back and I contract here, I can contract my whole chest muscle just as you would, right? So it's isolating movements. And so I created just movements for me that work for me. And that's just like anything. You go in and trial and error until you figure out how to do it.
And you actually had somebody push the humerus down, like a buddy.
Oh,
a buddy of yours.
Yeah. So early on, before we did bands, like they would push on me. So like I'm man built.
Yeah.
You know, like have my big buddies push on me to do chest press or push on me to do curls or resistance. And I think that's why I had a lot of growth as well going into lifting, because most people go into the gym and they're just fucking going through the motions. I'm like, You're not contracting anything, right? So they're more focused even on this muscle rather than creating your own tension and ripping it this way as well.
Yeah.
So I was just like ripping all different ways. And so created some techniques. And then about 10 weeks into my preparation, I went out to Mr. Olympia just to see some fans. I had fans at the time or supporters. And I always say I'm a big believer in moments of being guided. We're at the right place at the right time. And that's where the brain and focus comes into plays, because if you're really clear on what you want, your brain will pick up on the things that will help you get there faster.
Yeah.
But on the other side, if you're focused on all the shit, you'll see more of the shit and you'll miss all the opportunities that are right in front of you. And so I went to the expo Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I decided to chill. I went to City Athletic Club, which was a great gym, and I met The Rock there, and he posted me and kind of blew me up.
So he came up to you. He said, "Hey, can Dwayne take a picture with you?"
Yeah, security guard came up, was like, "You're Nick, right?" I was like, "Not many people look like this." You got the right guy.
You got this one wrong. You are blind as a motherfucker.
You got the right guy. And so they're like, "Can Dwayne meet you?" And they brought him over, and he's like, "I'm such a big fan. I love what you do. Can I have a picture with you?" And on the inside, I'm like, "Oh my God." And on the outside, I'm like, "Sure, bro. Drop my this dumbbell. Let's take a picture." And I rattled off all the things that I was going to do to Dwayne. I probably scared him a little bit. I was like, "I'm going to become the first Calvin Klein model with no legs. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to speak all over the world." He's like, "Holy shit." And he's like, "You're right, because you're going to figure out a way. We always find a way." And so that was that story.
Beautiful, man. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So we go in that, is this before or after you meet Tony Robbins? How does that whole thing happen?
Yeah.
I mean, he's sort of the king of this whole thing, right?
GOAT.
Any kind of self-help we talk about right now for this modern generation, it's not Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
It's not these guys. It's not Dale Carnegie. It is Tony Robbins. He has become the Michael Jordan of this generation of self-help people. So now explain to me how you meet Tony and what is your relationship like with him?
Yeah, that's great. So 2 weeks into moving to Tampa, I had a mutual friend say, "Hey," not a mutual friend of Tony, just I had a friend that said, "Hey, come to this mastermind. There's about 8 people, and just meet some entrepreneurs." So I went there, young kid with a chin strap, just bodybuilding, and we were all sitting around a circle, and everybody was sharing their story. And when it got to me, they were like, "What's your story?" And I started sharing my story, and there was a Russian guy who's in the room behind the camera, and after I shared my story, he looked at me and said, "You're going to be on stage with Tony Robbins one day." And I said, "Who's Tony Robbins?" I had no idea who Tony was, no idea anything self-help. And I started talking to Ratmir, and we started jamming out. And he was like, "I feel compelled to help you. I love your mission. I love your vision. I love your story. More people need to hear this." He's like, "I work real estate right now. I'm going to work for you for free. If you accept this, I'll work for you for free. And if you like the work we do one day, maybe one day we'll start a company." And so he got me to quit my job. He got me a speaking engagement. One of our early speaking engagements was with Gary Vee. He's like, "Dude, we got Gary Vee." I'm like, "Holy shit." And we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what we were doing when we were building the company. And it was just me going out on stage and just sharing my story. And if I could do it, you can do it. That's all I had back then. And so... And one of Ratmir's goals was to work with Tony Robbins, and consciously or unconsciously, like maybe this was the move to get there. And so our main goal, as we talked about speaking, he was like, the main goal is to get with Tony. Like if we get the GOAT, we get the GOAT. Like it's game over. And so we attended his UPW, his first event. It's a 4-day event, and we were broke, so they only got me a ticket, and they crewed. Ratmir and Don had crewed where they volunteered and just worked the room.
Yeah.
And Ratmir's like, dude, he's like, I'm gonna crew, but like our intent is to get you in front of many people that can get you to Tony. And so like I'm learning and I'm having my own experience, and then like out of nowhere Ratmir come up, he's like, dude, you gotta meet this person, and like give them like a little story or pitch. And like he'd bring me around to the security guard, and he'd bring me around to this person and that person. And then finally he brought me to this one lady who's been on Tony's team forever, and I was like, hi, I'm Nick, and this is my story. And she's like, wow, that's amazing. I'm gonna tell Tony. And I'm like, oh my God. And so the word had got around. We planted so many seeds. And we actually got my ticket upgraded, so I was in the front of the room with Tony's like personal people. So that was like a finesse and a plug. And then day 3, Tony only speaks day 1, day 2, day 3. And day 3, there was a kid to my left because he was in the important section. He goes, my dad's going to take pictures of Tony Robbins. Do you want to come? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want to come. And then it was a challenge to like, okay, I can get in, but how do I get my boys in?
Right.
And so like there's 2 handles to a wheelchair. And so I'm like, hey, both grab a handle. And we got up to one of the security guards. He's like, you all 3 can't go in. And we just sat there for like 2 minutes of awkward silence looking at him.
It's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
And he's like, okay, you can go in. And we went in, and I met Tony, and he's like, oh my God, I heard a lot about you. He's like, I want to invite you to my next event. And I was like, okay. And so we met Tony, took a picture, and then I went to his next event. And we just planted seeds, right? Like if you need anything, blah, 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 blah. We told this team, and I was like, if there's ever a spot in UPW, and they're like, that's not realistic, everything's packed, but we'll keep you in mind. And we didn't hear anything from them for like a year. And that was a year of Ratmir like emailing them and being like, hey, Nick just wrote a book. Hey, Nick just climbed a mountain, like just like in their head. And then finally they were like, hey, Tony's not there, but he has a youth leadership event in California. Would you come speak? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, we can't pay you, and we can't fly you out, and we can't pay for your hotel. Will you still do it? I'm like, yeah. Yeah. And by the way, most motherfuckers wouldn't do it. Right. Right. And Ratmir probably talked to me into doing it. I'm like, what do you mean they're not going to pay me? You know, like my ego gets in the way, and I'm young there. And so we go, and I knew if I burned it down with the kids that he would hear about it. And so I burned it down with the kids. And then at the kids event, I'm like, hey, if there's any spot, just let me know. They're like, it's not realistic, but yeah, we'll keep you in mind. Yeah. And another year goes by, I didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden we got an email, and they're like, hey, Tony's looking for a speaker for UPW. You're first on the list. Are you up for it? I was like, oh, shit, here we go. And so they're like, we want you to speak on day 4 about health and energy and vitality with your bodybuilding stuff. Tony's not going to be there, but will you speak on day 4? And I was like, absolutely. And now I'm on his stage, so I know if I burn it down, he's going to see it. For sure. And I've not only learned from Tony, but I've studied him. I know his body posture. I know how he calls out. I know how he gets everything engaged. Like I've studied all of this. And so I was like, I know how to burn this whole stadium down. And so I did. You know, I shook the building. I made everyone jump. I taught. I made them retain the information. And 2 weeks later, they're like, Tony wants you to travel all around the world with him. Are you up for it? And I'm like, I'm in. Yeah. And so I went to Australia with Tony. I went to Singapore with Tony. We did Miami Heat Arena with 15,000 people with Tony. Yeah. And blessed to get the goat under me.
So what is that like? Having breakfast with Tony Robbins, what is that like? Is he just words of wisdom just come out of this dude's mouth all the time? Like,
so I'll be really honest here. Is like not many people get to Tony. Yeah. And I don't really get to Tony. Yeah. To be honest. And so the only FaceTime I have with Tony is maybe for a quick picture, maybe backstage very quickly, but I don't get much time with Tony yet. And Tony, if you're listening to this, we're gonna get more time together. Yeah. So I don't really get much time with Tony, but he's been speaking for 45 years and has been able to allow me to condense decades into years. Of course. And so like, eternally grateful, but that is something like, cause he just turned 60 or 61. Yeah. And so we don't know how much longer we have of the GOAT. And so like, I'm going to push for more FaceTime with Tony.
I have a funny story because of what you said about there being 2 handles on a wheelchair. So in 2014, I was a videographer at the Playboy Mansion for Playboy's Midsummer Night's Dream. And I go there, and me and these guys were like, you know what every camera guy needs? A producer. What the fuck are you talking about producers? Like, yeah, every camera guy needs a producer. So 4 more dudes in. It's like, we need 4 camera guys. So now there's 8 of us. And like, we need dudes who do sound. Next thing I know, it's me and 10 of my buddies going into the Playboy Mansion, walking around. It wasn't but one dude. It was like my camera and one other guy. We kept the footage. The rest of it, we didn't keep shit.
You still have it?
Yeah, of course I have all the footage. Of course.
That's dope.
Yeah. It was because a bunch of the girls that were friends of mine, and it was really awesome. And then from that, I actually got the idea to show up to another big charity event, Babes in Toyland. I showed up and I was like, I'm going to do all this for free. I'm going to host your carpet. I'm going to give you a video. It's going to be better than the person you paid to do a video. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to do all of them for free. And then I'm going to invite a bunch more influencers to come. And I don't want you to give me anything. I'm just do this for the charity. And that springboarded every single thing for me. So I hosted both Maxim parties this year. At that, all of this, and I'm going to be a ring announcer here in 2022. All of that got sprouted from me, like what you said, willing to do it for free.
Yeah.
Right? Put your ego aside. I know how good I am. I don't need, like, you're going to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
But it's one of these situations where I'm going to do this for free. You're going to see, what value I can bring. And then I'm not, at no point am I going to say, hey, I'm impatient. Hey, I deserve more. You don't deserve shit. Nobody's coming to save you. You're just going to do the best that you can, man. So that's super motivating.
Love that.
Yeah. So Tony Robbins, what specifically is the attitude of gratitude is something I learned from him. What did you learn from Tony specifically as a mentor?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is your beliefs shape your destiny.
Yeah.
And so all of your beliefs are stemmed between 0 and 7 years old based on your conditioning, because your brain was in theta state, which is the door to your subconscious mind. And so if you can identify beliefs that are holding you back and reinstall ones, like, life will never be the same and you can achieve anything. And so, for example, like when we were I was at Power Room with Mike Tyson, and one of the things that he said was, God didn't create another man that could beat me. And I made a post on that, and I said the reason why Mike Tyson is the way he is because of his belief system. And one of his beliefs was that God didn't create a human that could beat him, and that was his fucking belief.
Have you seen 1986 Mike Tyson?
Yeah.
Have you seen those videos?
Yeah, he's a monster.
Listen, man, I know it's disrespectful to some people, and I'm not saying that Muhammad Ali wasn't the greatest fighter ever, but there was a 4-year period where nobody in the world was going to knock out Mike Tyson. He was going to take you out in one. It was nuclear bombs in the first round, every single punch. You're exactly right.
Yeah. So I would say that belief shape your destiny, and then the foundation to all of the learnings. And by the way, when we think of Tony, Tony learned from Jim Rohn.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn was his sensei, and Tony's my sensei, so it all gets trickled down. And so the foundation to life, we talked about the emotions, but being able to manage your emotional state is key. Right? And there's really 3 things that make up your state, which is your physiology, which is your breathing and your posture. The second thing is your focus, what you focus on, you feel. And the third thing is the language and the meaning you give things. And if you can master those 3 things, you master an emotional state, and nothing can fuck with you.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to do that over and over again with consistency and repetition, where you condition yourself to be this person. And Tony even says it too. He's like, I built this motherfucker. This Tony Robbins wasn't always like this. I did this with enough conditioning. And the same thing with us is we built this through over time. And so I would say that is the one saucy foundation that I got from Tony is if I can manage my emotional state and really condition myself to not let anything affect me, I will crush in business, I will crush in relationships, and I will crush in my body and my mind.
So speaking about, you mentioned state before and several times. I went and spoke at the elevator nights.
Yeah.
I was in the panel right after yours.
Yeah.
I walk in the door and I didn't know it was you speaking. I was like, that is the most confident. I was getting water and I was like, that is the most confident motherfucker I've ever heard in my life. Who's up there talking? God, I started feeling like shit about myself. I was listening to, who is this up here talking? I didn't have my glasses on. I couldn't see it was you. And I was listening to you talk and I was like, damn, you were sitting right next to Dan. And I was like, wow, man, that's incredible. It was the first time I met you.
Wow.
And then, so my question is, have you always been this extroverted? This is a hard thing for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Who they are, their default person, who they are truly is this quiet person with no facial expressions, right?
Yeah.
But we talk about entrepreneurship, sales, stuff that you have to do in real life. You got to be on Zoom calls now. You know what I'm saying? The camera's right here on your face. And I talk to my clients about this a lot. Extroversion is hard. A lot of times I tell my clients, hey, maybe you need to make up a person named John. John is he's your
new
extroverted
identity.
Identity you got to make up. I make my clients slap the table and say, let's fucking go. Do stuff like that to get them unstifled. Have you always been this extroverted?
No. And I think Ratmir Stalin gifted me that I may not seen myself with the communication. And it was actually funny because I was home with my parents for Christmas and I picked up and I'm like, Dad, you always tell stories. He's like, my dad always told stories. I was like, oh, that's where I get my storytelling from. Sorry, what was the question?
Have you always been this extroverted, or was this a technique you learned?
This is a muscle. This is a muscle that I learned, and that was a muscle of me going out on stage and not knowing what the fuck I'm doing, and just with repetition, and also teaching. So I think it's a skill, and what's interesting is fear of public speaking is one of the biggest fears. People rather die than public speak. And the thing is I always tell people when they want speaking advice is that you have to be focused. You're probably focused on the wrong thing. So if you go out on stage and you're like, what if I fuck up? What if I stutter? What if my hair looks bad? You're already focused on the wrong thing. I'm only focused on serving the crowd. And I don't care whether they like it or not. Like, I'm just going to serve the crowd, and that's what I'm focused on. So I'm not focused on myself. And so you make sure you're focused on the right thing. But being this extrovert, I'm really introverted.
Really?
So yeah. So I turn it on.
Yeah.
So like,
is there an exercise for this? This is the $1 million question, man. Is there like I was born like this. I'm not gonna lie. I could sit there.
Yep.
You put me on CNN today, I wouldn't even, my heart rate wouldn't even go up.
That's dope.
For is there a switch that you flip? Is there an exercise you do? Something that you say to yourself beforehand to flip that switch?
Yeah. So I have a ritual. I'll give a few things. I have a ritual. Everybody's heard of affirmations. Affirmations don't work, and that's affirmations are where you look into the mirror and you in your brain you go, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. Your brain goes, fuck you. You're not happy. But what I've learned through Tony is something called incantations. And incantations are saying your I ams, but out loud with intensity and getting into state. So if you do it enough times, you believe it finally, right? And so, for example, and I won't get really intense here, but before any podcast or any interview or anything, I'll go through my incantations. I'm a force for good. I'm a student of the game. I'm kind. Abundance flows through me. I'm decisive. I'm evolving as a leader, becoming the man I'm meant to be. I'm mastering the skill of influence. And I'll say it over and over and over again until I get to this specific state of absolute fucking certainty.
Yeah.
Till I'm certain, right? I'll do it behind stage. My move is I hit my chest. I've conditioned myself to hit my chest. I can call the dog anytime I need to call the dog. And so what I would say is, like, you have rituals, but also is lean into the uncertainty. If things make you scared, you need to do them. If things make you nervous, lean into that, because then the more you lean into uncertainty, things aren't as scary.
Yeah.
And so, like, public speaking, like right now you're listening to this and I know for a fact in your brain something popped up like, ooh, I don't want to do that. You need to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you need to do that thing. And that's one of my beliefs that I've installed is I lean into uncertainty.
Yeah.
If I don't want to do it, I must.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, one of the problems is that there's this almost like this bubble people create with uncertainty, what you're talking about. If I have a political belief or a scientific belief, I only look for things online that validate that. And people, one of the things I make sure I do, man, I'm one of probably a few people read Ayn Rand and Margaret Atwood. I read both sides.
Yep.
I don't try to just, I try to find things that call my beliefs into question all the time. That's the scientific method. I want to disprove my own hypothesis, right? That's what I wanted this program to be, was intellectual curiosity, right? So, I mean, with those beliefs that you have and your ability to turn that on, you're introverted, just normally you're introverted?
Yeah, like I recharge like by being by myself.
Right.
Like, no joke. We talk about bills, right? Like, if Bilzerian was like, hey, there's a party tonight, I'd much rather go home and play video games.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good.
Because he's like that too. Bilzerian is not like, it's funny. It's funny because you and him and Ryan Stewman have this thing in common. Dan is not super extroverted, but one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. Yeah. He tells stories like he tells stories like an old NCO from the U.S. Navy who's been 25 years telling war stories. Ryan Stewman tells stories about when he used to sell drugs and he went to jail. Yeah. The best story. There's so many great stories. And so it's funny like that, because I think probably part of the introversion makes it feel more authentic. You understand what I'm saying? Whereas sometimes for people who are super extroverted, we come off a little too polished. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, you're a storyteller. You're a fantastic storyteller.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But like I said, for everyone out there, it's like, even me, it's like I built this person and I'm still building, and I'm not a master and I'll never become a master, and I'm just a student of the game. And so I look for ways that I can just exercise my muscles. And so, for example, a lot of people stopped speaking when COVID hit, and I spoke more on Zoom. So, like, I was a monster when I came out of lockdown. You know, like, I'm like, let me out of my cage, because I've been learning and I've been teaching tools and I've been just repetition. And so whatever it is for you, remember, like, the thinking, doing, and being, you need to do something with enough repetition till it becomes. And now I can get on stage, just like you said, the CNN thing, I can get on stage or I can get on news and I can just rip it because I've done it so many times. Yeah.
So what do you, as far as an entrepreneur, what are the things that you teach, and what are things that people mess up on? What's your specialty when it comes to this teaching entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I have a proprietary method. My brand's called Victorious, and I have a victory method where basically I walk people through the acronym of victory, vision, integrity, courage. I go through the whole thing, but I help them build out a master plan for whether that's their body, mind, relationships, and wealth. But also help them create a more compelling vision for their life. Now, during that proprietary processes, I'm also helping them discover what's holding them back, whether that's beliefs, traumas, anything that they can release. And And on a one-on-one level too with entrepreneurs, I'm a practitioner in NLP, which is the language of the brain. So like I'm certified in hypnosis. I'm certified in timeline therapy, where I can take people back and eradicate the first time they've ever felt anger, sadness, guilt, fear, all of that stuff. I can eradicate all the negative emotions. So I do that on a one-on-one level. But when it comes to entrepreneurs in whole, everything's patterns. And so one of the biggest patterns that I see with entrepreneurs, and it happens to me, it happens to all entrepreneurs, is your brain robs you of your own success because you're like, what's next?
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, right? Or like, I can say, give me some wins today. They're like, well, I closed 50 people, but it wasn't 55. I made $1 million, but it wasn't 2.
Right.
And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, you're not celebrating what you have. And so the brain is robbing most entrepreneurs of their happiness because they're always on to the next thing, rather acknowledging what's right. They're always acknowledging what's wrong or what could be done better. And so that's one of the biggest patterns that I see with entrepreneurs.
Do you ever see people who like do feel imposter syndrome? Like they're having success and they're not really sure if they can compete in this level. I'll tell you just a story for me. I was hosting an event here in Las Vegas, and my name was literally on the flyer, and I walk up to the event thinking, I hope they let me in. I remember thinking this. Yeah. I was like, man, I hope they let me. Like my picture was on a billboard, and then I was like, I hope they let me in. And I'm like, I am the host. I was like, and I just remember getting in, and everybody's so happy to see me. Literally, the GM came and walked me in, and I remember thinking, what is wrong with me? I keep thinking sometimes. And this is the thing I have to fight is like sometimes I remember I was interviewing like Paris Hilton one time or Mel Gibson or whatever. I keep waiting for some dude to come tap me on the shoulder and be like, no, man, this is not you. You're not supposed to be here. There was a mistake. Yeah. There was a mistake. I hosted an SB party. I'm interviewing all my favorite athletes, and I keep waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder. It's like, all right, you need to go now. We're going to have security escort you out. You're not supposed to be here. This is not for you. And it never happens. It never happens, and it still stays with me. Do you ever have that issue personally, or do you have that issue with some of your clients?
Yeah, well, it's funny you said that whole event thing that happened like a few weeks ago, where we showed up to a specific event, and Ratmir was pushing me, and he's like, "We're just gonna go in the green room." I'm like, "What do you mean we're gonna?" It's like, "Dude, you're Nick. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like you're a speaker. Like you do this shit." I'm like, I don't know. He's like, dude, what the fuck? Like get in there. And so he pushes me, but it's also reminding yourself that you belong, and doing the work to remind yourself that you belong as well. So it does happen to me. Also with clients, for example, too, is like we can have someone that's very successful, but like won't acknowledge that they're a successful entrepreneur, like doesn't believe it. And what's pretty interesting is if you trace that back, maybe it's the little kid that wanted praise from the dad that he never had.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Or they as a young kid, they thought that they weren't getting praise or love, but that's what they were only focused on the shit, and they realized, wow, my dad did love me in a specific way. I just never looked at it that way. And so a lot of the times when that stuff comes up, it's the little kid in you that is still working through some sort of trauma or some sort of healing. And that's where I can go in on an unconscious level and bring them back to that moment and have them heal through it, so life will never be the same.
So NLP, Neurolinguistic programming. So what exactly do you, or can you talk about it? What is some of the stuff that you do? Because it's always been kind of a mystery to me how it works.
Yeah, shit, man, it's a lot, but I'll give you a few things. So neurolinguistic programming, which for some people has a bad rep because they just don't know it, or they don't. Some people can use it for bad. You can use it for bad, and you can use it for good. And so, for example, with NLP, like some things that we learn and you don't know that it derives from NLP is like rapport. Like modeling and mirroring or matching and mirroring, right? Or for example, it's like I can ask you a question and I can see where your eyeballs go to tell whether you're kinesthetic or visual.
Right.
Yeah. So I can read your eyeballs. I can tell if we're in rapport based on the rosiness in your cheeks or your lips filling up a little bit more, like things that like ninja things that people don't really know.
They're like autonomic nervous systems. Yeah.
But also NLP too is understanding the language of the brain and realizing that your unconscious mind knows everything. Your unconscious mind knows all your fears, all the things that you're hiding, all the things that you don't want people to know, and to be able to get people into a hypnosis state or a trance state so that comes through and they can work through what they're hiding. And so, for example, it's like, I just got off one-on-one calls today, and at the end, I'm like, your unconscious mind did an amazing job. You were in trance the whole time. Wow. They're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, good job. They're like, what? Wow. Yeah. And so, because you can see when the conscious talks and you can see when the unconscious talks. So, for example, it's like if I can ask you a really deep question and you're like, your first instinct, your unconscious mind will give you the answer, but your conscious mind will go, nope, fuck, no, don't tell him, because something is about to change, or your ego is about to get destroyed, or something's about to die.
That's a narrative I want to push forward, so I don't want to say what I really want to say.
Yeah. And so to be able to get people into a specific state where they say what they really feel, that's not surface level. Like, for example, it's like I can ask you, what's your problem? You're like, I don't have time. That's fucking bullshit. That's your conscious. Like, what's the deeper problem in going down? And so I think NLP really helped me not only with communication, but it's something that I embody and I use on an unconscious level every single day. But the reason why I got into it is because I asked myself, where did the goat learn from?
Right.
Where did Tony learn from? Right. And what Tony did was he actually took NLP and made it very simple as well. And you don't know what he's doing, but I know what he's doing. And so I just...
So does Tony talk about NLP, or do you think he's just doing this because he's learned it, or do you think he's subconsciously doing this?
Everything. So like it's subconscious. It's in him.
I've heard exactly what you're saying. You are not the first person to tell me that.
Yeah.
The anchoring things with the hands that he does. I've heard the exact same thing.
Yep. So he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's also unconscious. It's in him so much. But he doesn't let you know what he's doing.
Yeah.
He just brings you through the magic. And that's the thing too, like with the skills that I have, it's like for a high executive, like pay me $50,000 and I can eradicate all the negative emotions in your life. That's like magic.
Yeah.
It's like you wake up and like life's literally never the same. And so I would say like he took NLP, he mastered NLP and made it in his own thing as well. But he also mastered and learned from the master of language, and the master of physiology and the master of state. Like he's taken these senseis that no one really knows about and combined it, and now he's Tony Robbins.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really great. Yeah, Tony is one of the things where I see him, the way he communicates, and that is the thing that I take away from it.
Yeah.
And the incredible confidence. And the other thing, the story about how he was flying over a building where he used to be the janitor in that building, and then he starts crying, and it's like there's the genuineness. Man, oh man, you're just like, you like you said before, you're in the presence of greatness, right?
Yeah.
You realize that you're around a master. Okay, so now the next thing I want to ask you is, you have a tremendous amount of, not only are you a good speaker, you have a tremendous amount of confidence. How would somebody learn to be confident the way you are?
Yeah, confidence, very simple. Make it very simple. It just comes down to doing the shit that you say you're going to do.
Right.
And so what happens oftentimes, especially during the New Year's, is you make a promise to yourself and then you break it.
Yeah.
Now, multiple things happen. When you break one promise, what is it easier to do?
Yeah.
Break another, break another, and there's your downward spiral. But what we don't realize is on an unconscious level, every time you break a promise, you're actually diminishing the relationship you have within yourself. You're diminishing your self-integrity, you're diminishing your worth, and you're diminishing the way that you view yourself. And so oftentimes is you'll break one promise, then you'll keep breaking them, and then you'll just downward spiral rather than just like, all right, let me get back up again and do what I said I was going to do. And so I think confidence can come from is you setting I have a few non-negotiables. Like my non-negotiables in my life is like prayer, 45 minutes of movement, 25 pages of reading, and my incantations. And those are like my main things that I do every single day. And so setting up some sort of non-negotiables in your life. So you do those things, they make you feel good, but also celebrating when you do the things. Like, what's the point of winning if you're not going to experience the win? And entrepreneurs do that all the time. We remember I mentioned is like we win and then we're on to the next rather than like, holy shit, I did that. Pat yourself on the back. And so confidence comes from following through on those things. And I'd say that is the key, like self-worth and confidence, because you'll never make more than you think you're worth.
Right.
And I always say that whether it's in relationships, if you don't think you're worth the relationship, you'll get with the guy or girl, and then you'll self-sabotage it because unconsciously you don't think you're worth it. Yeah. Same thing with the weight loss. If you don't think you're worth the weight loss, you'll lose the weight, then gain more back. And so I would say for someone that wants to start is just like set like tangible things that you can do every single day that you're going to fucking commit to and commit to them. And if you fall off, don't fall off forever, just get back up, because you cannot build off failure. You can only build off success.
Beautiful. I'm obsessed with the way people learn. I'm curious, when you say reading a book, are you a Kindle guy? Do you like audiobooks? How do you like to learn?
Yeah, I use Audible.
Okay.
I use Audible, and then if I really want to retain is through Audible, I'll write notes. Like I'll pause like every like 10 seconds.
Have you used the whisper feature? So it goes Kindle directly to Audible. It'll go back and forth.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
It's awesome. And you can take notes on the Kindle really quick. Okay. So you put notes on the Kindle, and then as soon as you put the Kindle down, the audiobook will catch up to that exact same sync point and then just keep going.
Oh damn.
I'm just obsessed with the way people learn. And now my other question is, you're in the gym and you're working out. Do you have headphones on? What are you listening to when you're doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the gym, I like to disconnect from work in the gym, so that's like my gym time.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather not answer anything. And then sometimes I get sick of music and I'll sit in silence.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, and oftentimes too, if I listen, and this is just my learning style, if I listen to a book in the gym, like I retain as much because I'm not writing my notes.
Right.
And so like I'm like, I got to go back to that. I know I have to go back to that. So it's either music or silence.
That's interesting. I shoot free throws and I put my phone up on the stand. And when somebody says something, then I go take the note down. I do Audible, talk to text. Then I go down to the next note. I go back and I just keep shooting free throws because I can't be out of balance or not in the present moment while I'm shooting free throws. It's not, or I shoot 3-pointers, one or two. Yeah. And because I have a little gym in my unit, my condo. So that's what I'll do while I'm listening to other people, because then it's not just me eating crappy food or just driving my car like an automaton. I have to be present in order to make the ball, go in the hoop. So that's something that I've been doing. All right, so the ego, you do mention the ego. You've mentioned this before in some of your other interviews. How does someone transcend the ego? How do you get past that? A lot of people would have, for me, like honestly, if I had an ego about what I could accomplish, a lot of times I see the ego will make people say, I can't win because of some excuse, because the Illuminati, because of the Rothschilds, because the world is out, the world is out to get me, or those reptiles that live underneath Australia. There's always some reason why I can't win. I can't win because of Donald Trump, or I can't win because of Hillary Clinton. I can't win because of this or that or the other. And then I feel like the ego is creating an identity for these people. And to me, it's like, I don't care if they're the worst people in the world. They ain't gonna stop me from making money. They are not gonna stop. No, none of George Soros can kiss my ass. Ain't none of those people gonna stop me from making money, whether or not it's true or not. How do you transcend the ego? How are you able to do that?
Yeah, I call these override moments. These are override moments. So for example, when you get triggered, or by the way, you can feel when your ego is coming on.
Yes,
like you can feel that, right? And I've been challenged a lot with like doing this in my relationship with my girlfriend, just because I'd never had a girlfriend. And so with this one, it's just, a lot of times maybe the ego or too much alpha or whatever comes up, and I want to be right, whatever. And so I look at this as override moments, but I'm also grateful for these moments, because if your ego doesn't come up, then you have no chance to win. If your ego doesn't come up, you have no chance to override. And so, for example, it's like when you're triggered and when the ego comes up, you are now presented an opportunity to either go through your old identity or override it and take an action that you're not used to taking.
Yeah. And
so that's what I call override. And on a brain level is every single time that you override and you do a different action, like if you're used to saying fuck you and then you like drop down, take a breath and say something really nice, that's breaking the pattern.
Yeah.
And if you do it enough times, you unwire and rewire that neural pathway, so you'll default back to a greater setting.
Yeah.
And so I tell people to embrace these ego moments, to embrace the trigger moments, because without them, there's no opportunity to move forward and grow.
Yeah.
But you have a choice.
Using those triggers to then say, hey, now I need to come back into
This is my moment.
This
like,
is my moment.
I get excited. Like, get excited when you're triggered. Get excited when you get pissed off, because if you didn't, you can't fucking override.
Yeah.
You don't know something's wrong. And so I embrace the trigger moments. I embrace the ego moments. And it's like, am I going to be victorious, or am I going to fall victim to my old programming?
It's funny. So in the Air Force, we have this thing called Aerospace physiology. They put you in this tank and they suck the air out slowly. They don't even tell you when they're doing it. I did it on my birthday one time. It was like maybe my 28th birthday. And I'm in there and I don't remember any of this. I have video of it where I'm like trying to sign my name and I look up and I keep going like this, and like the pen isn't even touching the paper. But one of the things they do in there is that you're supposed to know what your triggers are when you're going through hypoxia. For me, my elbows start to itch and my face starts to itch. So now when I'm in the aircraft and I feel that, I'm like, oh, now this trigger means it's time to put the oxygen mask on.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of thing. When I get mad and I know I'm getting mad, my heart rate goes up and my face gets hot. My face gets hot and I'm like, oh, the ego's here. I need to take a deep breath and say, is it really worth me breaking my fist in this motherfucker's face because he looked at my girl? Whatever the thing is, right? Is it really? I did a podcast a couple weeks ago on flat Earth. I have 1,600 comments on there of people just talking shit about me because I said the Earth is round. And I was like, am I going to sit here and argue with each one of these people? I was about to text them like, come beat me in Las Vegas, bitch. I'll show you what's flat. Yeah. But after a while, I'm like, this is my ego coming after these people, and I need to slow down and I need to stop and I need to come to the realization. The Earth is round. The Earth is round. Okay, so I'm gonna get some hate from that. Can you talk about gratitude, man? How important is gratitude? What the tool that gratitude is, and how gratitude can help you achieve your goals? Yeah.
So they did a study with like the EKG and the brain waves and the heart waves, right? And so when you're angry and frustrated, your brain and your heart are out of alignment.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times too, entrepreneurs, this is another thing that gets entrepreneurs in the way. They have a belief that like when they're angry, their brain works faster and they can work through anything, which is such bullshit. It's not sustainable. You can only work from anger for so long. and nothing comes good from anger. And so gratitude, not only we talked about you can't feel those negative emotions simultaneously, but when you're in a grateful state, an appreciative state, you're in a most resourceful state. And so when you're full of gratitude and appreciation, you can find solutions way faster to things. You can achieve things way faster, and you're in alignment. And Tony has the quote, when you're in your head, you're dead. When you're in your heart, you're smart. And the way that you get into your heart more is you drop down into compassion, you drop down into love and gratitude, and more of an appreciative state. And, talking about states is like, when you're angry and pissed off and stressed, you're in an unresourceful state. So you're not going to think right. You're not going to be able to solve problems. But when you're in a resourceful state, which is gratitude, appreciation, certainty, then you can fucking bulldoze and you can solve things way faster than any other state. And so that's what I'd say is starting your day off with gratitude or conditioning yourself to go into those moments. And by the way, the visualization and meditation is one of the most powerful things, but it's so underrated because no one really understands it.
Right.
And the reason why it's so powerful is because it's this concept called neuron mirroring. And neuron mirroring means that your brain can't decipher what's real and what's not. That's why the greatest achievers, the greatest athletes, Conor McGregor, when he knocked out Jose Aldo, he had visualized it over and over again. Because when you visualize and you get really good at it, your brain doesn't know whether it's real or not. And so, for example, before I went out and spoke in front of 15,000 people with Tony, I was a little bit scared. And so that week prior, I visualized I was going to hop or walk out on stage. I was going to look to the left, look to the right, shake the building. I knew exactly what I was doing. So when I got out on stage, it wasn't my first time. It was my 45th time.
Right. Had the repetition.
And my brain goes, you're right where you need to be.
But you visualized the success, what it was going to look like.
And felt it. I see it. That's like the submodalities is like you see it, you hear it, you feel it. That's the same thing. It's like I can, one of my goals is a Lamborghini Huracan, and I can like literally feel myself touching the leather and touching the bowl on the steering wheel. Like, and that will allow you to, that's the thing too, going into gratitude. Can you be grateful for something that hasn't even happened yet?
Yeah.
You can.
Right.
And if you're grateful for something that hasn't even happened yet, it's already happened. Time hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about visualization until I heard the playmaker, Michael Irvin, the wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys back in the 90s. He talked about that. He talked about he could see where the ball was coming to the point where the defender didn't even matter anymore. Michael Irvin, he was for those of you who don't know, he would run a fade and then he'd run this comeback route going back towards the sideline. And like Troy Aikman didn't even have to look. He knew where Michael was every single time, and he could see it because he'd done it so many times. He was already in this dude's head, and it was one of these situations where he could see it beforehand. It was like this for this podcast. I've been seeing what this would be like because I've been watching you talk for 8 hours. So that's the reason why. Like I visualize it, and then when it comes to fruition, your heart rate is steady. You know what to do. You know how to take right action. The subconscious can take over, right? The autopilot, and so you know exactly what to do and how to make that work. A couple other questions: entrepreneurship. Communication, and when you hire and transition from people, how do you handle that? What type do you open communication? Do you have techniques for communication? Because this is for some people who are just starting off as entrepreneurs. One of the problems they have is I'm the technician. Remember, E-Myth Revisited, the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. I'm the technician. I know how to build the product, but I'm not really good at sales. I'm not really good at fulfillment. How do I communicate with these people? Maybe I'm introverted. I'm not that type of a networker. How am I able to deal with the other people in my business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say because you can have a stud but in the wrong seat.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think the main thing is understanding your strengths and then dropping your ego and understanding your weaknesses and seeing where you can bring people in. And Fleyshman calls them quarterbacks.
Yes.
I think it's so brilliant. And so for me, for example, it's like I'm speaking. I'm the content, I'm the creation. I can speak, put me out on stage. But when it comes to like the funnels and stuff, like I leave that for my team, right? Or the finances, I can only count to one, so someone else do it, or something like that. And so I would say that you need to be very transparent on what your strengths are and what you enjoy. I would much rather put people in places where they enjoy and they can thrive rather than putting them in a box where they don't really fucking enjoy it. The money's great, but they're not really enjoying it. So I would say one of the core values in our company is just transparent communication. Let me know if you're unhappy, triggered, sad, angry, so we can work through it. But identifying like where do you thrive so I can put you there. And so people just have to be open and willing and authentic enough to say, hey, I don't like this or I'm not good at this. I would much rather be here. And that's also comes down to knowing your worth, because I run into a lot of entrepreneurs that are brilliant, but they won't speak up because maybe they don't feel like it's worth it or that their value isn't there. Does that make sense?
That was a big problem for me.
Yeah.
Like I was doing so much stuff for free just because my buddies would ask me to. And then people would always ask me, like, when are you going to come out with a product? I'm like, a product? Do this for money? No, I could never ask my friend. I could never ask my friends for that. I could never, it feels so ingenuine. So yeah, for sure. That definitely was not my strength. So do you have any beliefs when it comes to things like multitask? I don't know if you've ever read The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's one of my favorite books, probably changed my
Keller
life.
Williams.
Yeah, from Keller Williams Realty. Do you have any beliefs when it comes to multitasking, or do you just focus on one thing at a time?
Yeah, so we have a great mentor, Jeff Hoffman, and Jeff Hoffman created the kiosk in the airport and Priceline.com. He's like badass dude, and he's pretty low key. And he taught us early on. He said, "Get your one gold medal and then move on." And so we're big believers in getting our one gold medal and moving on. But oftentimes as entrepreneurs, you want to do so many fucking things.
Yes, at
once. You get shiny object syndrome. You're like, I want to build this product and this product. And so that's what I do is we get our one gold medal and then we move on. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just like get it, make sure it delivers results, and then move on to the next. And then also, and this is just off topic, but another thing that has been a game changer for me is asking my people what they want rather than me trying to create something based off what I think people want.
Yes.
And that was a game changer for me. So oftentimes entrepreneurs will create a product or service and like, this is the best thing since bread, and then we'll release it and no one wants it. The reason being is because you didn't ask your people what they wanted.
Right.
And so I learned this from Garrett J. White backstage. He was like, I was like, how did you create Wake Up Warrior? And he's like, I sat on calls for hours and I analyzed people and I listened to them and I shut up. And I was like, okay. And so what I did was like, after Funnel Hacking Live, anyone that tagged me on my story, we reached out and was like, hey, would you just jump on a 20-minute call with Nick? He just wants to ask you questions. And I sat down with 50 entrepreneurs and I said, what do you like? What do you don't like? What do you struggle with? What kind of coaching do you like? Is it group? Is it one-on-one? And they gave me all the gold. And so I listened to my people and then I deliver.
My first product I came out with was 12 hours long. It was 50 modules long. At the end of it, it was a year between the first product and the second product, and we asked all the clients, what is it you want? And then we took all the questions that they asked and we compiled the story. And what you'll find is, of those 50 modules, 80% of my retention is in 10% of the modules. And then when in the new program, it's like this. I have this one module, it's just on event planning, like throwing events like I throw. Yeah. And I get so, like, everyone just wants that module so badly. Then I have a module on leadership. I'm like, this is what you need, guys. And I'm like, crickets. Like, no, guys, really, you need to eat the vegetables with the dessert also. But it is one of these interesting things where I listen to exactly what they say. Then I built a second product completely off their feedback, and it does really, really well. The things that happen from that. You said know your worth. This is real interesting to me because there are two places. Know your worth as an entrepreneur, and you also mentioned about a relationship. You said if I go and I meet some woman and she's like, she doesn't accept you for the body that you're in, then let's not waste each other's time.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, knowing your worth?
Yeah, knowing your worth. I think a lot of the times people can get into relationships and you sabotage it because you don't love yourself. And so like you're trying to, like I said, you're trying to fill a void with something external when you haven't done the work on yourself, and you're trying to fill the void and soothe when you haven't dealt with what the demons inside of you. And so that's what I mean by that. But also when it comes to entrepreneurship is I believe that money is value. And also if I can save people time. And so the more value that I can bring, and the more in my field, right, the more breakthroughs and the shifts and the transformations and really powerful exercises that I can take people through, they're more willing to invest. But also, this changed my paradigm with like high ticket and stuff, was realizing that like if I make it easy for people in the beginning, like I'm doing them a disservice and they're not going to get the results. And so like, for example, if I gave you a $20 workout program versus a $1,500 workout program, which one are you going to get more value out of? You got way more psychological skin in the game on the $1,500, and you have more to play full out on. And so, but as a coach, if I make it easy with a payment plan or a small thing or going around the corners for you, like you're not going to play as full out as you would. And so actually the more people pay, the better results they get.
So they have skin in the game, so they're more likely to do what you need. Okay, Ryan Stewman talks about this also, how many people that he'll sell a digital online program to and they don't even look at it.
They don't even look at it.
Do you have this issue too? How do you get people? Because because I do 4 live calls, group calls a week, and then I do maybe 15, 16 one-on-ones, and I call the guys out. What module are you on? How many? So there's 26 books in my program they have to read. I make it very hard, and I'm like, which book are you on? How far are you down this? And all of us are looking, and it becomes this sort of like cadre of guys and then they can teach the other guys. Do you have the same situation where like they gave you the money, so my problems are solved now? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so a few things. We noticed this because when I created like my inner circle in my coaching group, like, bro, like 2 years ago, I used to sell a year with me for $497.
Wow.
A year.
A year.
A
yeah.
year. Every single Monday, I will teach you for $497 for a year. That's what I thought my worth was. Yeah. What the fuck?
Dude, I'm not
right?
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because I did the same shit. Lifetime, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
What?
That's because we didn't think we were worth it.
Like, bro, I'm not gonna be 80 doing this.
Yeah. And but then I realized too, like, up the price and stuff, and then like I got to the point where we understood that anyone with a heartbeat could benefit from me, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily want to work with those people. And so, for example, it's like I don't want to. I'm just being honest. Is like I don't want to be the guy that has to sell you on why it's important to invest in yourself.
Right.
Like that should, you know what I'm saying? And so like battling over like, what do you mean it's $1,000 for 7 weeks? I'm like, that's you know what you're getting, like 7 weeks, $1,000. That's like nothing. But I'm like fighting with people like, is it worth it? I'm like, I don't want to waste my time. And so that's when I shifted into like entrepreneurs, because I feel as if entrepreneurs, they know the power of investing in themselves.
Yeah.
And if they see the value in it, they'll do it. And so I don't have to even like, I don't have to convert you of like personal development's powerful, you know, like I don't have to be that guy. So I understood that. And then what I've realized too is the more money they pay, the more results that they get, but also I pre-frame. And the way that I pre-frame is to let them know that like I can give you all the tools and all the strategies. A few things. This is how I make mindset so important as well, is like I can give you all the tools and all the strategies, but if you don't have the right psychology to follow it, you're not going to get anything done. So I could tell you how to sell, I could tell you how to pitch, I could tell you where to say it, when to say it, but if you have the wrong beliefs about yourself, about sales, it's not going to work. But the second thing is them understanding that knowledge is potential power.
Yeah.
Like we all know people that have doctorates and shit, but don't do, just being honest, they don't do shit, right? So everybody can have the knowledge, but it takes someone that actually implements the knowledge. So I kind of pre-frame identities with them.
The problem that I just had this conversation with a dude, super smart. He has a very technical job, and I try to get him on TikTok, and he's trying to put out these long form technical things on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, it's TikTok. I keep trying to explain to him, like, because you are so intelligent, you want to show you're smarter than everyone else in your sales process. I'm like, you got to stop doing this. Yeah. You have to understand, like, subvert your ego. Now, show me 5 other people who have done this. And he shows me these 5 other people. And even though they have millions of followers, he doesn't respect them because of his intellect. He's using his potential, like what you said, his potential knowledge. He's like, oh, because I'm so smart, I'm going to go day one and my sales technique will become, fuck everything that Jordan Belfort or whoever has to say. Forget all this other stuff, Simon Sinek or whoever, all these sales techniques, Dale Carnegie. I don't need any of that. I'm going to make it up because I have 2 master's degrees.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, oh man, having a mentor that is somebody that you don't think is as smart as you, that's the problem, man. That's why we talk about speed of implementation, suspension of disbelief, and finding mentors, right? If somebody's doing better than me, I'm just going to shut the fuck up and listen. That's what Ryan Stewman said. That's what I believe. I believe the same thing. I'm just going to listen. There's definitely something that I can learn from here, right? I'm never too smart to stop learning. So that's awesome, man. That's really great. Finding your why, right? Start with why. How does somebody find, so for instance, you have found a calling as a public speaker, right? Yeah. How does somebody else, a lot of people are like, well, public speaking is not my calling. I don't know if I want to make an info product, Michael. How do I find my why? What would these people do to find their why? Yeah.
I would say very, very simply is I've discovered my why just through trying everything. I've tried a lot of things. As you look back on my life, I was a skateboarder, I was a prankster, I was a bodybuilder, I was a health and fitness, coach or whatever it may be. And so I found my why through figuring out what juices me up. And so I would say just try things, whether it's like maybe for you, it's not speaking, but it's teaching on a smaller group, or maybe for you, like right now you're coaching men and women, but it really fires you up to coach men, men's group, right? So I would say like ask yourself like what really fires me up and juices me up, and also is like what topic or skill I don't mind learning, right? Like I actually enjoy learning it, right? Because like I didn't learn anything in school because I didn't enjoy it, and it wasn't something. Right. But now, if you put the brain in front of me, I'm like, oh, it's so cool, And so it's like find out what you really enjoy learning, and then go into that and identify what skill or how you can provide value in that niche or that marketplace. And so like, I don't want to learn things that I don't enjoy. Yeah. Like I will. But by the way, there is a balance to that because I will learn foundational knowledge, so I don't get fucked by like agencies and hiring people. So for example, it's like, we spent so much money hiring agencies back in the day for like funnels when we had no idea what the fuck a funnel was.
Right.
And it's like, that's stupid. And so like there are things that I need to get foundational knowledge on so I can lead, but there's other things that I really get juiced up about that I want to learn, and I want to learn that skill and that value, and there's other things that I don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
And so I would say identify. It's pretty interesting too, because you ask people like, why do you go to work? And they say, I have to. And it's like, well, that's bullshit. Like, what's the deeper reason? And I was just talking about this to understand or to identify your compelling reason. And I'll give you thought joggers is like, maybe in health, you want to lose weight and your surface level answer is like, I want to fit into those jeans. But the truth is deep down is like, you want to look into the mirror and not cringe, but truly love yourself. Or maybe you want to run around with your kids and not be out of breath. Or maybe you actually want to see your little girl walk down the wedding aisle. Those are like your whys and your compelling visions. And so I would ask yourself, like, what's the deeper reason on why we're doing what we're doing? Ask questions. All your answers are through your questions. Your questions are the answers. Your answers are the questions. But make sure you're asking great questions, because your brain's a problem-solving mechanism.
Yeah.
And it's always going to give you an answer to the questions you ask it. But most people are going around asking shitty questions like, why am I not a good salesperson? Why am I not a good father? Why can't I be in a relationship? Instead of saying, what makes me so amazing that a girl would enjoy me? What makes me an amazing father in this moment? And entrepreneurs listening right now, maybe you ask yourself, what makes me successful already in this very moment? And you'll probably identify you're way more successful than you think you are.
Yeah. You did mention the whole part about girls liking you in high school, and you're in a relationship now. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are the, because man, listen, it's hard out in here in these streets, bro. And I live in Las Vegas. How do you make that work?
Yeah. So Cam and I met on Instagram. She slid in my DMs. And at first she was like, you're very inspirational. I love what you do. And I just replied, thanks. Like, I didn't even look at her profile. I just replied, thanks. And then like probably a few months later, she like replied again with hard eyes, and I clicked on her profile. I was like, oh shit. So like maybe I should nurture this lead a little bit, you know? And then so we started talking, and what's pretty interesting is like our first, we FaceTimed and like we talked for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that was like weird, because I was the weird kid in high school. I was like, and I didn't have it yet, but I was the weird kid of like, when are girls gonna think like financial freedom's dope? And like, when are they going to think that's an attractive feature and someone who's on purpose and like that different type of stuff? And I don't know where that was coming from, but that's how I operated. And I spent a lot of time thinking girls were going to fill a hole for me, and they're all like surface level. And so when I met Cam, she was very like in depth, and she can have a conversation and she could talk intellectual. And I was like, oh, that's hot. And so our first time we met, we would meet all over the world because I was traveling. And so the first time we met, I told the event coordinator, love y'all, I tell the event coordinator I need my assistant to fly in, and she was going to be my assistant. She had to push my wheelchair, so I wasn't lying. And so she flew in, and I got her a trip to Tahoe, and I spoke, and she saw me spoke, and then we had this amazing 2 or 3 day date. And then we did long distance, and my whole thing was like, can she handle like the entrepreneur life? Right? Like, can she handle me traveling around all over? And I am even long distance, I was like, I've never cheated. This is my first girlfriend as well, so I was never unfaithful. And I was like, I'm going to be extremely faithful, and I'm going to love as hard as I can love. And if it doesn't work out, at least I did my part. Right. You know, and a lot of times we're afraid to love, and we're afraid to lean in because we don't want to get hurt, but at least you fucking loved, and like, at least you did your part. And so we did long distance for like a year, and we were very open with communication. I'm like, if you want to go see other people, like see other people. She's like, no, like I don't want to see anyone but you. And she paid her dues. And so when right before COVID hit, we moved. She was living in Cali. I was living in Tampa, and I moved to Vegas. And we moved in together. And for a lot of relationships, COVID either destroyed them or made them stronger. Yeah. And we became stronger. And we're coming up on our 3 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah. She's super hot too.
That's another thing where you got me beat. You know what I'm saying? That's incredible, man. I guess last thing, what would you tell yourself when you started this entrepreneurial journey, right? You start, I'd say maybe the inflection point. We'll go back to the day when you decide, hey, I don't want to do these pranks anymore. I want to become a bodybuilder. You could go back to that point and tell yourself what would you say to yourself?
I would say to myself, be more welcome and open to constructive criticism. My ego always used to get in the way, you know, like, even if it was love, you know, like, and you just close down, and I would shut off, and I would tune it out. And so I think I'm very far ahead in my journey, but I think maybe I'd be a little bit more further if I was a little bit more open and drop my ego as a young cat.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely had that problem too. You see somebody, you know, with the Lamborghini and the watch, and my first instinct is like, ooh, like, no, he must have cheated or he bought those or whatever, instead of saying, I could learn something from that dude.
Yeah.
I need to shut up and learn something from that guy. So yeah.
Or like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, if you see someone that has something that you want and you get a negative feeling, like, you got some fucking work to do, because you'll never see a loser hating. You'll never see a winner hating on another winner.
Bro, that's the truth.
You know?
It's funny to me when I see people that like need, and I'm just going to use them as an example, they need Jake Paul to get his ass kicked. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I want to see the fight.
Yeah.
I don't need him. I don't hate him because he's got money and girls.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Ask yourself, because I see so many of my friends are like, I can't wait to see him in there with Deontay Wilder. And don't get it twisted. I think Deontay Wilder would mess him up pretty bad, but I don't need to see successful people lose to break them down so that I feel better about myself.
Yeah.
Catch yourself. Are you a hater?
Yeah.
Catch yourself. Are you a hater? Because this is not constructive for you building your own business. I'm just going to build a better business. I'm not going to worry about tearing anybody else's down. This is why if I date somebody, I'm like, do whatever you want. If you want to be part of this team, I'm just going to tell you what the rules are. If you don't want to, the freight train is going to keep going, so you can jump on or jump off. It's whatever.
Love it.
Man, you are an inspiration, man. Obviously, come on, man. I mean, you didn't have to do this. I really appreciate you coming out here and doing this podcast.
Thank you, brother.
This is fantastic. How can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me, my OnlyFans. No, I'm just kidding. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at Nick Santonastasso. I'm the guy with no legs, one arm, and a bunch of tattoos. You can't miss me.
That's incredible, man. And I can't wait to check out your OnlyFans. That's fantastic.
Swipe up.
Swipe up. Swipe up. $3 for the next 31 days.
That's cheap.
Yeah. Hey, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. This journey is incredible. It's selfishly, I get to ask questions to people that I've always wanted to meet, and I also get to ask questions for you. Thank you so much for the feedback that I'm getting. And in real life, when I walk around Las Vegas or when I'm in Los Angeles, how many of you come up to me and just, I keep thinking that you're going to say, I need to move over, or you want me to take a picture, or asking me which way the bathroom is. And you come up to me and you're like, I fucking love your podcast. I'm like, really? I'm like always surprised. It's always that imposter syndrome. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I'm going to keep saying thank you over and over again. Thank you again to my incredible guest right here. I can't imagine I'm going to have anybody more inspirational than this. So it's fantastic, guys. And we will see you all next week.